Yo guys, Tineda here. Today we're continuing with how to ambient and I want to talk about synthesizers. Let's start with a new project with a new clean slate. I had a few ideas of how to approach the topic, but I think the best would be if I first try to explain the way I'm approaching synthesis itself. Spoiler alert, it's pretty simple. I try to keep things simple in terms of sound design mostly. Then I will talk about the synthesizers that I'm using most often. Maybe some of you will find it helpful, maybe some of you will find something new. And then after that, I will just briefly summarize some tips that I have learned so far. So yeah, let's get into it. Boom! Suddenly we have a few synthesizers and a few, let's call them melodies. So how do I approach this? It can be any synthesizer, basically, which is capable of subtractive synthesis. That's what I mostly use, which is like you have the oscillator. In case of 3x OSC, it's like 3 of them. You have a bunch of things to pick from, the waveforms, the oscillator waveforms. And then you process it further with filters, which are not the case in here, but in here. So here's the same. We have 1, 2, 3 oscillators. We can enable each of them. And there are 2 filters that you can use the way you want. Subtractive means we're taking something out of the original signal. So let's get the example of this thing. Oh, actually, it's already taken out. Yeah, I've enabled. So it started like this. That's a saw wave. You're probably familiar with basic types. I'm not going into wavetables. I can, but I don't see the reason. And like I said, most of the time I try to keep things simple. Saw wave. A few notes here and there, but I don't like how harsh it is. And generally speaking, harsh and treble heavy sounds are not perceived as dark, and we're trying to make something darker here, dark ambient, you know, that sort of thing. So we'll enable the filter and make it darker. Which way? Just taking out the high end, because this is the filter that lets the low end through and kind of gradually gets rid of the high end. Yeah, just to make it slightly more, I don't know, emphasized, I will enable the modulation. Modulations aren't always necessary, but they give a pretty good feeling of development of the sound. Something changes over time, whether slower or faster. You can see with each note the filter slightly gets lower with time. That's because of this envelope modulating the filter cutoff. We can increase the range of modulation. It's a little too harsh, so we decrease the cutoff a bit more. It's not ambient though, still. Let's use some effects. This sounds like a pad to me. Just to preface things. Yeah, I haven't talked about it yet. I've started from the synthesis itself, but generally speaking, I try to plan the arrangement beforehand. What does it mean? I try to have most of the usual instrument ranges covered in the track. Leads being somewhere in the middle of the spectrum, maybe a little bit higher. Some effects or textures, usually something noise-like, which means it's very high in the spectral range. Then we have pads, which is mids or lows. And then we have low end, which is either bass or some lower pads. In this case, this sounds like a pad. It's not a good pad yet. We have some movement, just tiny little bit. But for a pad, we need some space as well. This is very mono. We don't have voices, we have only one voice. We can increase to 2 or 3 voices, it's gonna give it some stereo. It's a little bit detuned too much. I want it like this. There is space already. Good. But that's not enough because it kind of ends abruptly. It doesn't leave us the lingering feeling, which ambient uses a lot. We can increase the, what do you call it, release here. Sure. It's kind of there, but in my opinion, we could do better. Of course, we're gonna go and enable the reverb. I will go and change the size a bit. Cut off maybe like so. Slightly lower. This will be like that. Low cut, yeah. Like that. High cut, fine. Chorus amount, delay, no mix. Oh, and to make it less lead-like, because leads are usually things that occur from the get-go. You hear the chord strike, you hear the leading melody progression, but pads are more mellow. I'll increase the attack. We have that drop in the volume. I will increase the release to get rid of that so that 2 notes cover each other. The beginning of the new note will get covered by the release of the previous one. Still not enough. We're getting somewhere. That's good. I'll leave it this way. It's fine. Let's keep saving this project. Let's just save the... just so that I don't forget about this thing existing. Synths. Let's call synth titled. Fine. Should be it. We got pads. Let's take a look at the lows. I very much like this specific synth for the lows. I'll be talking about it later on in the later part about the specific VSTs that I'm using. But like I've shown in the first episode, you can create exactly the same sound in pretty much any other synthesizer. I'm using this synthesizer because it's got the preset and it's way faster. I don't need to tweak a whole lot of things. I just click the preset, increase cutoff, decrease the resonance. That's it. It's a nice low end, and with automating the filter, which I usually do, we can increase the energy or decrease it, because the high-end content will increase or decrease accordingly. Nothing fancy, just, these 2 sounds together. Whoa, that's not the sound I was looking for. I'll talk about the other one later on. Okay, there we have it. Basics of the progression for the, let's call it ambient, or maybe it's even closer to some space synth. You will see in a moment why. I don't want the leads in here. I wanted to go instead with some arpeggios. 3x OSC. Very easy, very basic kind of synthesizer, but it works. The first sound that you load it with, you can already make it work. I've made an arpeggio, and I've clicked it just the way I've heard it in my head. There's nothing super duper fancy. One thing that I like to note, I have 4x4 division kind of count or whatever you call it here enabled. But with arpeggios, I don't always follow the grid necessarily. Like the notes are on the grid, but they are usually not 4x4, and instead they go into different, slightly weird sometimes time signatures. This one is not an exception. Instead of 4 notes repeating 4 times, I've used like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 notes repeating 4 times. And it shifts a little bit with the grid. So that, yeah, we have something like that. Nothing fancy. This sounds good, as is even. Being the lead thing, it's kind of in the middle. I'm not sure if it won't, collide with the pads, but let's hear it. Okay. Pad notes don't quite align with what we have in the arpeggio melody. I didn't really check them and try to harmonize them. Let's try something like that. That's a little bit better, but still our arpeggio is kind of flat and boring. We might want to use some more effects, perhaps. And also it uses 3 different octaves. I want it to be the same octave. Also it's sine wave. Maybe we should, I don't know, change it to something like that. Wow, that was pretty cool. I mean, that's what you're mostly doing as you're approaching with different ideas and trying to I don't know, glue them together. Just try stuff out, and sometimes it works, as you can see, and it works pretty well. It's a bit too loud right now compared to everything else, so I've assigned all of these synthesizers to mixer, and I will just adjust the loudness of the arpeggio to be not as loud. And also, I think I should drop a compressor or something like that, maybe. But we'll see about that after this run. Nice, nice. That's pretty good. But still, I feel it's boring. We don't have a whole lot of options here. We can change the waveforms. We can change and fine tune. We can also use amplitude modulation, which personally I'm not a big fan of, but that's fine. So if we want to process it further, we have to drop some effects onto the mixer. Or in this case, my usual go-to is to send this track to a reverb track. Let's get some EOS. It doesn't have to be this exact reverb I've shown in the first video. I've been using their Valhalla Supermassive. It's another great reverb. I like EOS as I need to tweak less things here. The default state is already very good, and I'm lazy. I don't like tweaking things a lot because I lose creative ideas very fast if I am tweaking things. I think there's a lot of people who have the same problem. Like whenever you start focusing on technical parts and on the quality of sound, on the, I don't know, some specific measurements, if I may say so, or tonality or something like that, you don't think about the composition anymore, and you are quickly losing the focus on the creative part. Therefore, I try to not overly focus on technicalities at first. The less things I need to tweak, the better. Here we go. This is good. I'll continue with that. As you can see, this pattern doesn't align with the rest of the patterns, and that's fine. We'll make one more here and they will start aligning again. Okay, this was an attempt at some sort of effect, but I rarely do that with the synthesizers, honestly. This is a pretty interesting one. Cygnus, it's called, I think, and it's a freebie if I recall correctly. Has a bunch of weird stuff. It's very good. Oh, it's from Crackly, by the way. I think it's the same guy who made Arminator. Yeah, I think that's the same guy. The idea is, or was rather, to have 2 repetitions of this part, then add some additional effect layer, or maybe some textures. Speaking of which, usually I make textures with samples or field recordings. I rarely use synthesizers for that. Sometimes I do, but even when I do it with synthesizers, most of the time I just bounce it off to audio and process it later on as audio. But here, just for the, showcase, this guy. It's pretty good. I just have to make it louder somehow. Let's drop, I don't know. And yeah, this is the way. If you're limited with the synthesizer itself, like, it's not that I'm limited. I probably don't know what I should, change here because there's not a whole lot of information. These are some knobs, I think. Maybe not. Whatever. But yeah, I'm not familiar with this synthesizer and it's just hard to read what's happening. Therefore, I'll leave it the way it is. Like this. But I will increase its loudness with other means, which is effects on the mixer track. Should be Clipper or some distortion or, oh, actually Blood Overdrive. It's good. It's good enough. Should be good enough. See if we can hear it better now in the mix. Good. That's very good. I like the point where it's sitting right now. And to develop sound further, with synthesizers specifically, I would likely increase and open some of the filters here, just so that there is a feeling of a build-up of the energy, of tension, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, I'll go here. I'll start opening this filter. Therefore, I have to create automation clip. We'll enable that. It's probably somewhere here. And up to here, I will likely have it like that. Should work. This one is already pretty open. This is odd, I shouldn't open it anymore. Yeah, I think bass would work the best here. So let's hear how it sounds all together. Pretty good. So, as you can see, simple things can be made into more complex ones. The basic idea is to fill the spectrum. Low end is quite full. When opening the filter, it's even more full. Like so. Background is filled with this reverbed long pad, and then we have even more reverb on the high end, which makes a mix pretty saturated, if you may say so. Nice, cool. Is it dark? I don't know. Might not be the most dark of the dark ambient. It's I think it's closer to space synth, but it is not up to me to decide what genre or sound it is. Basically, this is the kind of sound that I make. Some people call it dark ambient. It's probably a little bit dark. But yeah, general approach is here. The idea is here. So let's go into synthesizers. And here I've sat down for a while and I kind of calculated and thought about which were the most used synthesizers for me in the past year. I think these 10 would be, it's a bit more than 10, but yeah, roughly speaking, 10-ish synthesizers would be the ones that I've used the most. And yeah, let's get the first one is Flex. It's simple, it's easy. There's lots of cool sounds. The most necessary controls are already laid out here for you, and you can freely automate them. It's awesome. You can't deep dive into the sound synthesis itself, but like these are good enough to tweak things and to change the sound just enough so that it fits into your mix. And from all the packs, from all the presets, has a lots of sounds to pick from. It's like 1,605 sounds, presets, namely. Some of those are percussive, some of those are, I don't know, sound font based maybe, but just a few, not too many. And still for the tool which is included in the FL Studio, this is a beast. You can straight up produce music using only this synthesizer, in my opinion, and that's gonna be pretty good. So yeah, it's fair to say that probably this was one of the most used synthesizers for me because it's so easy and like streamlined in here. The next one, OBX, it's also good. Oberheim emulation or recreation, I don't even know. It sounds really good. Faithful. Very old school kind of vibe. Very retro. Hardware, if you will. But what is hardware these days? Who knows? It has some effects on top, which I think the original one didn't have. And yeah, it's just a good one. I sometimes tweak sounds, but there's also a lot to pick from. The more I make music, the more I find that less tweaking is actually better in terms of results than more tweaking. So I try to pick the synthesizers that already sound good. Then we have KULT. Oh boy, that was a great one. Last year I've discovered it and it's gritty. It has unusual approach to synthesis with what the oscillators and effects do and how the whole chain goes. It's, yeah, I had a few streams where I just sat down and started creating samples, not samples, patches from scratch. It's good, just saying. If you happen to get it on a decent sale, it's a good one. It's a paid one. OBX is also paid. I don't remember the prices, by the way. I'm sorry in advance. I will leave the links, as usual, below in the description, but I don't remember the prices. Some of these are free. I will tell which ones. But some of these are kind of costly. The next one especially. Synplant. It was quite impressive because it's like the proper AI usage in a synthesizer, in my opinion. The idea is you have this Geno patch, you drop any sort of sample, any. And the synthesizer tries to recreate the part of the sample that you have put there. That's very cool. It doesn't just copy the sound, it recreates it using the parameters of the synthesizer itself. So you can further tweak it. Like whenever you pick some sort of a sound that you liked, this one. You can play the sound, but also you can tweak it here, just as a normal synthesizer. Suffice to say that Synplant has a very, not a very, but quite a specific approach to how it generates the signal and how it processes it further. Like the LFO and the steps and those parts are, I don't always fully understand how they interact with each other. So I try to limit my fiddling with these. But as long as it's something more simple like filter or reverb or saturation, yeah, that's pretty cool. That said, it is quite impressive what this thing is capable of. From this, and so on. It can be effects. It is actually pretty damn good with drums. I'm not sure if I have drums here, but I've shown that in other videos. You can go check it out. It's a good one. And usually what I do, I either store the patch itself and reuse it somewhere in some sort of context musically, or if it's something like effect here, because this sounds to me like an effect or texture, I still bounce it to wave. So I go get some Edison, I then record it. Something like that, and then drop it as a wave file and bounce it and process it further as audio. Okay, back to synthesizers. The next one is Aparillo. It's another effect-like synthesizer for me. It's FM-based. It has 20 or something voices, and each of them has own modulation, so it's like 20 layers of something. And then you pair it with the randomization of presets that is built into FL Studio. There's also this automation thingy, which you also can randomize. And there was movement somewhere here. I don't remember where, but yeah, you can record your own movement like this. Yeah. Let's randomize it further. There's a lot of sound design potential as well. Next one is JP6K. You probably have seen this one quite a bit, mostly for the bass sound. But also for leads. It's good. Also, resembling the hardware sound. It's modeled after Jupiter 6K, as the name suggests. It's cheap. I think it's around 25 or 30 bucks, but it sounds incredible in my opinion. If you like this kind of approach, go check it out. I use it quite a bit, honestly. The next one is probably the best one. Why the best? Because it's very capable and it's free. Vital. I've shown it earlier, making the pad, but I haven't shown you. I think I have a bunch of, yeah, these are all my presets. It's like, I don't know how many there are. Probably 30, 40, 50, something like that. I've been making them for a while because I like how this thing sounds and what kind of sounds it can create. And so on. There's a lot of them. For a freebie, having a fully fledged wavetable synthesizer. I don't even often edit wavetables. I just use whatever there is and create something from scratch. Filters, some cool filter modes, effects, pretty good ones. I might not always like the reverb here, but it works. It's all right. Still, I often use external reverbs if I want something more spacious. But yeah, this is quite cool. Next bunch of free synthesizers is from Full Bucket Audio. I think I've mentioned this guy. It's like, this is an example of one. It's FB 3100 300 3100 something, whatever. But the guy has a few more, like quite a few more free synthesizers on his website. Link down there in the description, and they all sound pretty good. If you're into old school sounds, this is gorgeous. This is awesome. There's a lot to pick from. Go check it out as well. Similarly, that's another freebie, Viking VK1. Another one with older sound, hardware sound. You can see how my style is influenced by the types of synthesizers that I like to use. So also basically classic subtractive synthesis with a bunch of things you can tweak. You don't always have to tweak everything. Just find something that works for you. There's a lot of options. And last but not least, I think most people know about this guy. This is basically almost the same as Vital, except the use case for me at least, it has a bunch more filter forms and the effects are a bit better, especially the reverb in my opinion. You can change from plate to whole and they sound different, and depending on maybe you need a specific hyper dimension thingy. I don't think hyper/dimension is available in Vital. Let me check it. No, there's only chorus, delay, EQ filter, flanger, phaser. Yeah, I mean, flanger phaser is kind of similar, but in Serum it works a bit differently and it sounds a bit differently. Besides, you have flanger here already, so yeah. And phaser. I wouldn't say this one is necessary. It's good. There's so many videos. What am I doing? There's so many videos about the sound. Serum is like one of the most used synthesizers. It is quite expensive. I'm not sure you have to buy it because like most of the things are covered with Vital, in my opinion. It's just free version of Serum without a few specific things that Serum has implemented but Vital doesn't. If there's anything else I can tell you about synthesizers, I don't know, mention it in the comments below. Maybe I've missed something specific. But you saw the process. It is quite ordinary, I would say. Just, making things work together in a neat way, hopefully. Okay, are you not tired of me yet? Because I'm a little tired of myself right now, but still. Tips and tricks. First things first, keep things simple. Don't overcomplicate stuff unnecessarily. Ambient is not the most complex genre in the world. It can get complex, but not because of the synthesis, not because of the sound selection maybe, not because of the mix, but rather when you layer things together and you have a more built-up composition, that's where complexity shows up usually. Tip number 2. Don't overuse reverb. It will make your mix harder to mix. I try to remind myself about it, but I often fail to remember it. So yeah, if you want to have easier time mixing things and finding space for new instruments, cut down your reverb usage. Seriously. Tip number 3. Whenever you find a new sound, try to place it in the arrangement before you actually place it in the playlist, in the arrangement. As in, find sounds that have purpose, not just randomly picking anything that you like. Whenever I add something new, I already know whether it's going to be a bass, whether it's going to be a pad, whether it's going to be effect or texture maybe. And that helps a lot when making things work together. So again, making mixing easier. Another thing that I haven't realized for a long time, it's all about sound selection. Initially, you're not very good at understanding what sounds good. It's like an acquired taste. The more you do it, the more you understand and have a gut feeling of what it sounds good. Usually, if the arrangement and mix are perfect, the sound selection is what decides whether the track will sound good or not. And the last one for today, it all may sound very analytical and very kind of logical, the way it is structured and at least the way I approach it. But don't forget to just have fun. Don't forget to look for some cool moments. Oftentimes you have to sit down, start making something, and during that process of creation, the idea shows up. You think of something new. You try something out and it sounds good to you. Go with the flow. Don't try to overanalyze it. Sometimes you have to be analytical, sure. Skeptical, sure. Sometimes you have to cut down the ideas if there's too many of them. But yeah, stay playful. Be creative. A little bit of patience, but creativity is out there. You should actively chase it. It won't chase you. So, I hope it was helpful. I hope you will have some new ideas after watching this video. And stay cool. See you in the next one.